Good evening, and welcome to this special meeting of the Board of Directors of the Midpeninsula Regional Open Space District. I am Margaret McNiven, President of the Board of Directors. This meeting is now called to order. It is 5:31 p.m. This meeting is being held in person at the district's administrative offices and by teleconference. Roll call, please.
Director Gleason,
Here.
Director Kirstine Tucker,
Here.
President McNiven,
Yes.
Director Holman,
Here.
Director Kishimoto, Director Sear,
Yes.
and Director Riffle is absent today.
Okay. There is one item on tonight's closed session meeting agenda, and that is conference with real property negotiators. Are there any public comments on this item
President McNiven, I do not have any oral comments.
or online?
Correct, no oral comments in person or online.
Thank you. Okay, we will now go into closed session and be back at 6. This meeting is now called to order. It is 6 p.m. This meeting is being held in person at the district's administrative offices and by teleconference. Roll call, please.
Director
It's
Gleason,
on, but
Here.
something's going on.
Director Kirstine Tucker,
Here.
President McNiven,
Here.
Director Holman,
Here.
Director Kishimoto, here, Director Sear, and Director Riffle is absent today.
The one item on this agenda is a study session to receive early feedback on parking area design guidelines. May we have the staff report, please?
Okay. Good evening, Chairman Nathan and board members. I'm Susanna Chen, Assistant General Manager, and I will present the item to you tonight. The General Manager's recommendation is to review and provide feedback on draft elements of the parking area design guidelines, including overarching values and typologies. I will start with giving you some background and why are we doing the design guidelines. And as you know, parking is an important element of public access. Parking areas serve as gateways into our preserve, and it provides that transition space for from the surrounding urban, suburban environment into the open natural areas. Historically, the district provided relatively small parking area with natural service at our trailhead. However, as the visitation to our preserve has grown over time, the demand for larger and more parking areas has also increased. In 2014, Board approved the Measure AA, a 30-year, $300 million general obligation bond, provided the funding for the district, allowing us to shift part of our focus to expand public access program, including building more parking areas, expanding parking areas. Additionally, the new regulatory requirements, such as the ADA requirements, the stormwater management requirements, as well as the district's recent implementation of transportation demand management strategies to help manage parking demand, all contributed to building bigger parking area and bringing those more urban design elements into our parking area. So everything I mentioned affects the aesthetic of our parking area that really prompted the board's interest to develop a parking area design guideline to make sure that our future parking area really reflects the district's conservation, our environmental stewardship values. In response to your ask, we hire a consultant to help us develop the parking area design guidelines. So the work is ongoing, but we wanted to bring this item to you tonight to get you feedback on some elements of the document. So, but let's first look at why are we doing the developing this document, the goal of this effort. We wanted to develop a framework for incorporating an appropriate open space and natural world aesthetic design character to our district preserved parking areas. The design guidelines that we're developing center on the district's mission statement, and they are in alignment with the district's vision plan goals. And the document and those guidelines goes beyond the basic technical design principles. They focus on the character qualities of our parking area that reflects the district's open space, land, and conservation values. As I mentioned, the document is under development, but I wanted to give you a preview of what's going to include in the document. The document have 3 key components. The first one is parking area values. That's a very important component of the document. It highlights the overarching guiding principle when we're thinking about designing a parking area. So those the parking area values are developed based on our mission, our vision goals. They express the district's value in meeting together the functional requirement of a parking area and with the ecologically sensitive parking access. The second components of the document, it's about design approach. And in order to convey the design approach, we first have to determine the type of landscape within our land. So that's the parking typologies. The typologies describe the general landscape and agricultural character of a site. And in this elements of the design guidelines, the consultant will provide guidance on how to design a parking area in that particular typology, that the design respect and complement the land's physical, visual, and cultural integrity. The third elements of the guiding the guideline documents goes a little bit deeper, is that's the guidelines. And the guidelines are a set of principles and standards that defines the design of specific parking area elements. So now it goes down to individual elements of a parking area. And those guidelines help ensure a consistent design identity across the district lands. So again, if you can vision that we start with the value, and then we go a little bit more specific into the design approach for the specific type of landscape within our district lands. And then it goes down to more in the detail of the individual design elements. So that's kind of the structure of the document. So tonight, we wanted you to provide feedback on 3 elements of the document. And I will go over those the elements that we want you to provide feedback on, and we'll come back and you will have an opportunity to provide feedback on each element. The first one is the parking area values. Again, this is the overarching guiding principle for designing a parking area for the district. So the consultant has identified 4 value statements for our considerations. The first one is to respect the natural landscape and cultural setting. And each value statement is supported by language that further clarify and explain what that value statement means. So, and we'll come back to that. but I just wanted to just highlight the value statements. The second one is to establish a transition zone. The third one is to exhibit a sense of place. The fourth one is to address sustainable construction and maintenance practices. So that's the parking area values that we will want to get your feedbacks on. The next elements that we want to get your feedbacks on is about related to the design approach. At this stage, we just want your feedbacks on the typologies. The consultant recommended 3 natural landscape typologies: forest, grassland, and chaparral, coastal, and baylands. So that is for land to capture the natural landscapes. And then another type of typologies, that's for cultural landscape. The consultant recommended 2 types of typologies: the agricultural lands and also culture and archaeological sites. I just want to mention that the typologies are not mutually exclusive. So a site could be a grassland and also could be a agricultural land. And what we want your feedbacks on is this list representative enough to cover the diverse landscape of our of the lands that we manage. And the consultant will take those typologies and they will develop the guidelines or recommendation how to design a parking area within that specific typology. The last elements we want your feedbacks on is the list of design elements. So we and the consultant recommended a total of 32 elements that are related to parking area design. And what we ask your feedback on tonight is the completeness of this list. Are we missing anything? Any items that you're interested in that you don't see here and you want us to include? And that's the feedback that we would want to get from you tonight. And the consultant will take this list and they will develop guidelines for each element in the final document. So, and I just want to quickly kind of go over the next steps before I turn it back to you, the chair. We will take your comments tonight and we'll incorporate your comments. At the same time, we're also collecting staff comments. There's a very cool online virtual open house that's going on right now. Staff are invited to look at the same information and they can provide their feedback. And the consultant will collect all their feedbacks and incorporate them as appropriate. We'll continue to develop the document and we are planning to bring the draft document back to you in April, just next month. So I think that covers all I wanted to talk about, and I will turn it back to the chair and I can answer questions that you have about the process, about the document, and then I will go back to the elements that we want to get your feedbacks on. And
should we start with the parking area, the values? We start with the parking area values.
Yeah, that's the first items I want.
Okay.
Yeah.
Comments. Director Holman.
What's her face?
Who are you?
I had a conversation earlier today this morning with Suzanne, and thank you for the call. And I expressed some concerns about the value statements. And what I ended up doing, and maybe staff could share them with the other board members, but what I ended up doing was redrafting the value statements, and I'm not committed to the wording But what I am concerned about, which caused me to do that and have the call with Susanna, is, and by the way, I do appreciate very much that the staff is pursuing this and bringing this forward, because it's been a topic of great concern and interest of mine for a couple of years at least. So thank you for that. What caused me to think about redrafting these is the focus. So I mentioned, when this had come up before, I'd mentioned the Yosemite design guidelines that they have in place. And what I find very different that from this, now that's a completed document. This is, beginnings of what a document would be based on. But what I find different is the tone and the focus, which the tone and the focus of the Yosemite document really features and focuses on, the existing ethos, the existing setting, the place setting aspect of Yosemite. And these value statements, to me, don't do that. They focus more, or maybe focus on a shared basis, the ecological concerns with what parking lots require. And so it's like coming from a design background, it's like with any problem, it's like, what's the goal? And you focus and start with the goal, and then you have constraints. And so for me, that's how I tried to approach the draft that I sent. And if staff could send those to the other board members, that would be great. So that's what I tried to focus with, is start with what the goal is, those parameters, and feature that, focus that. And then in that context, then address the requirements. So for instance, well, I don't have it memorized, but so for instance, there was one place where I put in here, so trying not to introduce urban features into our preserved parking lots, for instance. Look for more natural or aesthetically compatible required signage, for instance. So it's that sort of thing I tried to focus on in these. I don't want to try to read through these. And again, I'm not committed to this wording, but I am pretty serious about reemphasizing the purpose of this and what the focus is, which again is a natural environment and the place setting, or sense of place creation and continuance that are mentioned here. So I'm happy to answer any questions once everybody has the document.
Maybe it's a question more than anything, but I believe I understand what you're saying, but I just wanted to also confirm that in the context of place setting and selecting designs, materials, textures, colors, etc., that those are in keeping with the local surrounding environment, the natural environment, but that there's I don't even know if balance is the right word, but there's a consideration given also to the longevity and durability and maintenance of those materials, because in the context of parking lots and designs, there are ways to design, say, surfaces, for example, that are durable, but also have a look and feel that is much more natural. And so my sense is that's in keeping with that thinking, and that's what we're looking for is our complementary designs and features and materials and textures that complement the natural environment, but also that have the other values that we're looking for, like longevity and low maintenance and et cetera. So
yeah, I appreciate that. And so for instance, this is maybe not a good example, but it's just a simple example, so I'll use it. So if there's a no parking sign in front of, a space, we could put an urban no parking sign in there, or we could put something on a wooden post that's going to last for, maybe 40 years instead of, 100 years or something. But it's those kinds of things. And I just don't feel like in reading through this, that kind of focus is presented.
Okay, I think we can work with that, and I only bring this up because I'm looking at, kind of ahead at what is occurring in the near future, and certainly in the next 10, 15 years, and that is that we're going to have many, many more parking areas, both in number, but then also in size. Because many of these parking areas are also much bigger because the demand requires it. Again, in keeping with balancing, so that we're not impacting the surrounding. But by and large, all of our parking lots in the past were just really too small for both the demand and also what the preserve is capable of managing. And so thinking about that, I'm just kind of, again, thinking ahead, is that the more parking areas we put in and the larger they are, the more resources they're going to need to operate, manage, and maintain. And so I am looking at, okay, how can we marry all of this together so that you have all those aesthetic qualities that we want in as part of these parking areas, but they're not drawing a ton of overhead and operational needs, because we're going to be stretched, because there's going to be many, many more of them. And so we're sort of balancing all of that, given what lies ahead.
I think I appreciate that. And yes, there is more and more demand. And I'll stop after this one because others we're going to have questions. Has that file been sent around to board members?
I don't get it.
Yeah,
Anna has it, and Susanna has it.
you send it to my,
To your open space, but from my computer, so it may have an external in front of it.
But we need to get a copy to the public too.
can you see
Yes,
it?
yes.
No.
Um,
Oh, I got it.
so I think a separate conversation would be, maybe it's tangent to this, but a separate conversation is, as we talk about the size and number of parking lots, we also have a policy issue of access. So, the phrase that we all know is like paving over paradise comes to mind, is like, well, maybe there's capacity in a preserve to carry, I'll make up a number, 500 parking lots, 500 spaces in a parking lot. But do we really want to do that? So that's a separate conversation that we need to have. So no, I did not have that in mind with this, because that wasn't where I was going, what I thought this was focused on. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. And you're right. I mean, that does need a separate conversation. And all I was referring to really is, I'm thinking about our little parking lots that were like 10, 15 car lots. Those aren't cutting it anymore, I'm not necessarily advocating for like 100, 150, but the 10, 15 car lots are no longer adequate.
Yeah, and I was being extreme when I said
Yeah.
500, just, for example.
Hijimoto.
Yes, thank you. Well, I mean, as you've all noted, this is a really important conversation,
Yes.
and so so thank you for bringing this to us. Well, so I have like a number of comments, or just kind of things for people to think about.
Mhm.
So one is kind of this issue of scale, and I don't know if I saw the scale kind of as mentioned as either. Okay, I don't know if it's just in the values or, the other
More in
parts. But yeah,
the
just kind of,
design approach.
yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how we're going to word it, but I mean, just because we want a lot of people there, I mean, I don't want these huge mega spots, and so I mean that they should at least be broken down, right? Like we have seen the parking lots presented to us. So that's an important one. Another maybe kind of a question is kind of visibility, you know, from the road. Do we want the parking lots visible from the road, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, they become easy to find and they're safer potentially, you know, if we're thinking about safety issues.
Yeah.
But generally we don't want people driving through the open space and seeing huge parking lots either.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure, you know, I don't know what the right answer is, but it's a thing, something to think about. Let's see, and then I guess what Director Holman brought up. I mean, I guess I was thinking. I mean, I guess there's a difference between function and aesthetics, right? Because even if something you want something to look as natural, quote natural, but you use a very durable and potentially toxic material, that's not good either, right? So it's you know, what's kind of the aesthetic landscape, and then also the function of, you know, serving the public, but also kind of whatever the toxicity or you know, any the physical functions of functionality of the material that's chosen. And then a couple other quick ones is bike. I don't think I saw the, you know, bike park you mentioned on here.
The bike. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah,
we can add
yeah.
that. Yes.
And then you know, for the invasive plants, I guess, you know, more and more I see the brushes for cleaning the feet and the shoes and the bikes, and whether that's kind of an important message for
Mhm.
visitors that we want people to transition, take off your urban
Yes.
invasives.
Yes. Okay.
So that's a laundry list. And for Director Holman's comments, I mean, we're not adopting language today, right?
No.
Right. So
We
I mean, it sounds like you're going to be taken into.
Yes, so we
yeah.
can take this into consideration. This is most helpful as that's what we want to hear from you tonight.
Right.
And but sounds to me, just quickly scan it. Director Holman is keeping most of the value statement,
Mhm.
but she provided some suggestions on how to kind of explain what that value statement means.
Yeah.
So that's
And
very helpful.
Actually, what I did was I reordered them. Just one
Mhm.
quick example is, hang on a second. Should have been quicker, but, I think it's under establish a transition zone. Yeah.
Yes.
There's a statement in the middle of the original one, which didn't all come through, I guess, that I picked up and put in the front because it says minimize. I picked that statement up, put it in the front. Minimize the visual and aesthetic sensory impact on parking areas on the land. That to me is the most important thing in that whole thing, but it was
Mhm.
buried in the middle.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm reprioritizing, and while we're
Yes.
not, you know, this isn't the final document.
Right.
As you and I were talking about this morning, I think the tone that what we approved tonight is going to set the tone for the final document.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm trying to
Mhm.
address. As a teacher, you can appreciate that, Jed, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I guess so. And, you know, I would just say that,
That's okay. I don't know.
um,
Oh, okay.
yeah, the
Oh,
way
yes.
I would be looking at this is, you know, asking myself, so what does that mean for how we would look at, you know, design, like the La Honda parking and, you know, or the Verde Road parking lot and such. So I don't know. And it's so anyways, those are my comments at this point. Thank you.
Director Seer?
Well, the thing that strikes me very solidly is what a difficult dance we're going to have to do, because we're trying to balance a whole lot of things. And I was thinking, just sort of fantasizing one extreme is all 50 new parking lots must look the same, so we know that they're ours, you know, which is an extreme we don't want at all. And then the other side of the coin is, how do you take this, what's going to be a real change in the physical nature of a particular part of our property, and integrate it into and make it as helpful to both pay attention to the fact that we're away from the urban, but it also needs to be that transition, in terms of well, just the human emotional experience of that change. When the whole business has been presented more and more, the value of nature is helping to heal both psychically as well as physically. And so there's a whole flock of things that need to be balanced, and none of them are going to be perfect, but a whole lot of them are going to be wonderful. So, thank you.
Director Gleason.
I have a number of comments as well, but I have a question first. Could you go back to the slide where it talks about the different I don't remember the
Typology?
type. Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
yes. Yeah, it's a new word for me as well.
Yeah, I was wondering if have you had deeper discussion about what this might actually mean, or do you have any examples of how you would apply these ideas in parking areas?
So this is to kind of first determine what type of landscape within our preserve, right? So forest, grassland, chaparral. So this is first we need to determine that, and tonight with your feedback, and hopefully we can confirm that. And then the consultant will develop guidance on how to design a parking area in this kind of setting in the way that respect and complements the landscape in this typology, in these settings. So that is what they are developing, and they will be developed. And the goal is that this is the segment that in the document that talks about design approach. So they will provide information about how you think about what kind of things that you need to be mindful of when you are in this setting, when you are putting a parking area in this environment. Does that help?
Yeah, I really like this idea. I'm just very interested to see how it plays out in a real case.
Yeah.
And see the ideas that come into the design from this. But yeah, I think it's great.
No, I was just going to add, we have what's wonderful and beautiful about our lands is that we have such variety in landscapes. And that's, all account to the microclimates and the topography and the fact that we have the San Andreas Fault running through, and all of this just adds to just the diversity of landscapes that we have. And so in thinking about that diversity through these typologies, we can have the consultant think about scale differently in each of those different landscapes, because in a very open grassland setting, what you implement and how you implement in terms of scale, size, and mass is going to read very differently than if you're, surrounded by a forested environment. So it can play into scale, mass, materials. Certain materials will complement certain landscapes better than others, et cetera. So I think it makes it for a challenging opportunity for us, because now we're thinking about different landscapes and slightly different designs for each, but at the same time, creativity around that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So first of all, I think this is a great discussion for us to be having, and for me, it applies to much more than parking. I think it applies to, to many things, including roads and trails and other things that we might, build or change in the open space. For my purpose, I think the most important thing is for us to align on goals. And what I've seen is that in cases where we do get aligned on goals, I think the staff has done a great job of, bringing creative solutions out and putting great ideas on the table. And one example of that was the Bear Creek North parking, where I think, through public engagement and staff and board discussion, there was, or maybe committee discussion, there was, some new goals came on the table. And then I really liked what came out from that discussion, even though maybe we weren't even all that explicit. I'm not sure those goals had many words behind them, but the people's intent was there and it was clear. And I think the staff did a great job of going off and finding a really nice solution. So I think these types of goals, again, if we can get the right ones on the table and align on them, I expect we'll really like the results. And for my purpose, it doesn't necessarily need to have that many words behind it. So I'm not looking for hundreds of pages of documentation. I wanted to echo Director Holman's point about the Yosemite design guidelines. I did go and look at that. And one thing that I found was that it has this statement right at the beginning, is almost a vision statement where they say, in the construction of roads, trails, buildings, and other improvements, particular attention must be devoted always to the harmonizing of these improvements with the landscape. And that was from 1918, and it's still in their document today. And they actually come back to that in the text of the document. So in some of the sections, they come back to that statement as a sort of setting the tone, as Director Holman said. And then, let's see, I think to this point about cost and longevity and, taking into account the practical considerations as well as the aesthetic, I agree, both of those have to be taken into account.
Mhm.
I think one example of maybe the slight shift in focus is, I see Director Holman actually made a suggestion to switch the order of those things in the fourth value. So the address sustainable practices. It looks to me like the idea is to sort of shift the order of those things and put the aesthetics before the practical considerations. And then for me, that sort of makes sure that we'll have those ideas out there. I think I'd be very surprised if our staff, discarded practical considerations. I think they'll keep all those ideas there, but we want to make sure the aesthetic is there. And then just one more thing I wanted to mention. I'm not sure if this came in explicitly, but I think it's always important to know what the best practices around us are, looking out at what other people are doing. And this was on my mind because I helped guide a hike at Mayana Yakima Coyote Ridge last weekend. And they've actually done some really, very, very nice and very interesting things in their built areas close to their staging area. And I think Director Sear also talked about transitions. And what I noticed was that in each place where, as you're transitioning, say from the parking lot to the staging area, or the staging area into where they have their easy access trail, and then from there into the actual natural areas, each transition feels very smooth. It's pleasing to the eye. There's nothing jarring. So I think there are lots of people thinking about these things, and there's probably a lot to learn from out there. That's all. Thanks.
Director Kirsten Tucker, would you like to make some comments?
Yes, thank you. Let's see, I guess I actually liked the value statements in the document, excuse me, because I felt that they the statements acknowledged the diversity of landscapes that the district encompasses. So, and I think that's really important, that we continue to stay mindful. We're not Yosemite, that's a single park. It feels as though we have a variety of landscapes that need to be celebrated, which I think the consultants got at with the typologies. So I understand what Director Holman was saying, but I'm also comfortable with the direction that the consultants are going in. With regard to the typologies, it did occur to me that something that's not mentioned are the viewscapes. When I think about parking areas along Skyline that could look out either onto the bay or onto the ocean, pardon me, those view sheds are certainly worth considering as we design parking areas. So I'm not sure how you might knit that in, but it's something that I think we need to keep in mind as we design parking areas. Let's see, with regard to best practices, it's funny, as Director Gleason was saying that, I was thinking, wait a minute, I think the district is perfectly capable of with this developing our own unique best practices that will set our parking areas apart from those of the Open Space Authority or other entities around us. So I like the idea of continuing to forge our own paths, not that we don't learn from others, but forge our own paths and developing our own unique signatures around our parking areas. So I think that's all for me tonight. I appreciate this first step and this first look and the opportunity to make some comments at this initial stage.
Thank you.
Great. I just have a couple myself. I love the idea of considering a parking area transition. I thought that kind of clarified it for me.
Mhm.
So being practical, I just went straight to the guidelines, the one at the end, the 32 recommendations. And actually, it's not that I want to add any, it's that I wouldn't mind you considering removing a couple,
Okay.
just because it is a transition area.
Mhm.
And I think when people get out of their cars, they don't need to see picnic tables and benches.
Okay.
This is my opinion. I love the picnic tables. Don't get me wrong. I love the ones at Windy Hill, but already they've caused us there to be a big notice. Please don't feed the birds. So I would like to not see picnic tables and benches. Kiosk, I looked it up. Kiosk is a hut. I'm not so sure we want kiosks and shelters. If it's pouring with rain, it's fine. This is nature. And then EV stations. I think that's kind of catering to, I have an electric car and I always plan my mileage before I leave. I think EV stations would detract from the natural look of our parking areas. Maintenance buildings, I put a little question mark there because, if we have a huge parking lot, it might need a little bit of maintenance on site. But a more natural maintenance building if you have to have one. So that's me. I think the parking areas that the open space has designed today are actually quite lovely. And that's odd for me to say, but the one on Skyline has become part of it. As I said before, it just looks like it grew there. The one on Corte Madera is beautifully situated out of, and the one at Sears Ranch, you come up, you see these great grasslands and it's not disturbed by a parking lot, unless there's cars on it, of course. But so I congratulate you on the parking areas that we've done to date. And if we can keep up the standard, we'll be in good shape. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Director Kishimoto,
Thank you. Oh, well, thank you. Can I add just a couple that I
course.
just thought of?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Well, first of all, I just want to say I really appreciate everyone's comments here. I mean, Dr. Holman obviously put a lot of time thinking about this, and I think I know Steph is going to be paying attention to them. And I do agree about the aesthetic and as well as functional integration and Dr. Gleason. But I was thinking, just this gateway concept. I was thinking that in a way, almost there's two gateways in a way. And one is almost three, really. One is from the urban area into that open space area, and you're kind of already driving along, open space, and you kind of go from level 1 to level 2, and then from level 2 to from 84, say 80, one of the roads into the parking lot. You take a deep breath and you're into a different world. But then there is another one, which is from the parking space onto the trails. And, so it's kind of, cleaning your shoes but I did strike, what I was wondering about, we don't want more signage per se, but, I was thinking about safety and, whether, if we have that one sign of, I don't know if we want to have any, maybe we don't, reminders to new hikers about, are you carrying water and do you have hats and, things like that. But no, I guess not. Okay, probably not. Yeah. Okay. But anyways, I think that those step downs, I think are really very cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
We
Sorry.
we received one public comment,
Yes,
and
I
the
was just going
comment,
to say
yeah,
we
it's
have public
about
comment.
equestrian amenity. So it is not on the list. I don't know if the board it's open to add that to the list. That equestrian amenities. Yeah.
Yes, that was Jerry Wittenauer's comments. I thought they were very well. I thought they were great ideas, great additions to the list.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we have any other public comment?
Yeah, so we got from Director Kishimoto. Yeah, we will add that.
President McNiven, we do have one oral comment online.
Yes.
Okay, just a moment while we get that set up and get them unmuted.
Good evening. My name is Shani Kleinhaus. I'm the environmental advocate for Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. Last year, at the peak of Mount Hamilton, I saw a very, very small culvert under a road. The road was to a parking lot. The culvert was about 4-inch wide, 2-inch deep, and it crossed the road with a grade on top. Not sure what the purpose of that culvert was, but a caravan of native Western velvety ants used it to cross the road. How did these small ants know it was safe? I have no idea. But I think Midpen needs to consider parking lots and access roads and all that development from the wildlife point of view as discerning of the eye of an ant or the smell. Let me remind you again that the mission is to preserve open space and protect and restore the natural environment and protect opportunities for ecologically sensitive public enjoyment and education. It doesn't say there's got to be a parking lot in every one of the preserves. It definitely does not need long roads to a parking lot in a preserve. And asphalt is not environmentally friendly by any means. It's actually the ultimate opposite of restoring the natural environment. And like new roads, the more you build, the more you need. So many parking lots is really not an environmentally responsible prospect. I think the overwhelming value and priority should be on the protection and restoration of the natural environment. Yet this element is identified as one of 32 other elements, some of which are very urban, or some of them are very concerning. For example, parking should not require new electric connections, no lighting, no electric parking counters. Do you really anticipate parking lots that are so large that an electronic digital parking capacity signage and counters are recommended? it's such an urban element. Is there an app you can use instead, potentially? There is plenty of detail on a lot of these elements that could be developed with the parking lots and some practical best management aspects. But there is not a lot of discussion of things like wildlife movement, shade trees, and other elements of ecological design. So I hope you direct staff to address those in the guidelines and not only as a CEQA issue, but actually as part of the design and intent. And specifically, entry roads to parking lots should be extremely short if they are allowed at all, because those are so hazardous to animals and really not very good to look at either. So I actually think this needs a lot of work. I thank Director Holman for trying to shift the emphasis a little bit from the urban to the natural and taking Yosemite as an example. Thank you for your time and your work.
President McNiven, there are no further comments.
Thank you. Director Holman.
Yeah, I would like to add to the list of what's it called? Come on, wake up here. Wake up. Wildlife movement. Can't get the right thing up here. Add wildlife movement to the list of design guideline elements. And I agree with the comments about EV. I've had this discussion when we've done site visits too. It's like, they really are a very urban element. And I've never seen a natural looking EV station. And I appreciate what you said, Chair McNiven, about, you plan. So when you go there, you're not going to need a charge. Also the thing of lighting, probably not. Probably not.
About that.
Access roads being short, I'm going from what Shani Kleinhaus was just saying. I also have an apology to make because on my in my edits on the second one, established transition zone, the original is not accurate. I somehow rather cut and pasted the wrong thing or clipped something, but that's not accurate. So my apologies for that. Just a couple of last things about what I prepared. Again, I'm not wedded to these exact words, but I am really committed to the priorities being on the natural environment and putting that as a priority over maintenance again, because it's we should have an eye to that, but that shouldn't take priority over our design acumen. I added in a couple of places, and it was in the staff report, but not conveyed in this. I added aesthetic, and I think that was I think it was in the general manager's comments was aesthetic, which wasn't in this as I encountered it. And I also added sensory impact of parking areas. Again, because it's about creating a sense of place and a feel. And about transition, one of the things I definitely changed was the original talked about transition from an urban or suburban areas into the parking lots. And for me, that's just not always the case. A lot of our parking lots go from pretty rural settings. So I changed it to parking areas serve as the public's transition spaces between the surrounding natural open space preserves and areas outside the preserves. And that way we're not trying to like balance like something that is urban might be okay because we're transitioning from urban and suburban. I just don't think those terms apply to, holistically to our approach here. So anyway, I appreciate what time we have bringing this forward and what time you all have spent on it. I look forward to the next iteration of this, and I will have an eye again to the aesthetics and the sensory and the sense of place and the conservation aspects being prioritized. I think that's consistent with our mission, where some of the other things that were introduced here, and not ill-intended, but I think some of the things that were introduced here, as one might read them, are not so much in keeping with our mission and our vision. So I think that's it. And again, my apologies for not getting the original for transition zone in there. Thank you.
Maybe I have one more on the typographies, the three typographies. I'm not sure where this would go, but I would like to nod. Oh, grass. There is no agricultural area there.
Oh, right there. So this is natural landscape,
These are natural landscapes.
and then there's a cultural landscape. We have
cultural landscape.
that we have to be two types.
Yes, agricultural lands. I think we should always be mindful when we're doing a parking lot in an agricultural land
Mhm.
that we respect the rancher or the
Yeah.
farmers, and we do.
Yes.
I just want to reiterate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I expect the guidance that the consultant's gonna craft under this typology will reflect that. Yeah.
All right. One more, Director Holman.
I apologize. There were two others I had on this list of design guidelines
Okay.
to consider and this is just getting into a little bit more specificity. Number 26 says plantings and irrigation. To me, I hope that includes trees and heat island effect, because we have, I think of, let me think of a parking lot. Well, Rancho El Corte de Madera. I mean, I can't think of any trees in that parking lot. And for instance, it's like, I think we could do a lot better in integrating trees into our parking lots. So I just want to make sure that plantings includes trees and that we take into consideration heat island effect. And I don't know where this would go, but I've forgotten which parking lot design it was. There you are. Which parking lot design that came to us that we all pretty much raved about because it was very creative, and it wasn't one big lot. It was taking advantage of the elevations and the topography. I'm sorry.
North
Okay,
parking
yeah.
area.
That one did a good job of that. And I don't know how that would be captured here, but however one could word that. So if it's, so a parking lot doesn't have to be one big thing. So however that might be captured here.
Integrate more into the topography of the
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And also take into consideration like minimizing the impact to the kind of the natural resources. So sometimes you break it down, it may affect
Yeah.
a different area. So we always take that into consideration and balance that.
And some of that would address cut and fill too, which is
Yes,
on the list.
Yeah, I did that.
And the last one is 32 is use of environmentally friendly green elements such as permeable concrete and recycled reused materials. I'm not quite sure why that was on the list of design guidelines.
Mhm.
It seemed kind of odd because everything else was, paving materials would be a consideration. I think paving materials was somewhere. So I'm not quite sure why number 32 is what it is. It seems to imply that we would be using those, which we might or might not. So
Right.
I think those are my comments, and thank you all very much. And thank you for the call again this morning, Suzanne.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you for
All right,
a
thank
great
you.
presentation. Set a lot of thought went into it and got me
I think
thinking
there's
too.
more comments.
Oh, you've got a minute, Director Gleason.
Sorry. I just wanted to make one more comment. I liked that there was the Mount Umunhum connection with the consultant, because I think Mount Umunhum is another place where the built areas, the transitions in the built areas and between the built areas and the natural areas are really, really good.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure about the parking, but the area right at the top that I'm most familiar with,
Yeah.
that is really, really well done. So I like, if there's any tie-in to what we're doing here,
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Yeah, so the consultant team included the lead designer of that project. So that's one of the reasons we selected that team. It's a proven record of excellent design. Yeah, that reflects our values. So
Yeah.
thank you all
Did-
for your comments. I
so-
think we have a lot
So
to,
did staff capture the public's comments and also President McNiven's comments about no EV? I can't quite see from here.
Question.
That's-
yeah.
About access road length.
Director Holman, I'd like to confirm that the clerks are taking the draft minutes, and we have captured those comments.
Great, super. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, on that note, we will convene at 3 minutes past 7. Okay, 7:05. Later.
Thank you for supporting.
Oh, you're welcome. Good evening. And welcome to this regular meeting of the Board of Directors of the Midpeninsula. Oh, maybe. I'll start again. My mic was on low. Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Board of Directors of Midpeninsula Regional Open Space District. I am Margaret McNiven, President of the Board of Directors. This meeting is now called to order. It is 7:05 p.m. This meeting is being held in person at the district's administrative offices and by teleconference. Members of the public can attend and participate in the meeting in person or via Zoom. Instructions for submitting public comments are available on the meeting agenda. May we have roll call, please?
Director Gleason,
Here.
Director Kirstine Tucker,
Here.
President McNiven,
Here.
Director Holman,
Here.
Director Kishimoto,
Here.
Director Seer,
Here,
and Director Riffle is absent today.
Thank you. Okay, our first item of business is oral communications for items not on the agenda. Members of the public are invited to make comments on matters within the jurisdiction of the district, but not on the agenda tonight. Please note that the Brown Act does not allow action by the Board of Directors on items not on the agenda. You have 3 minutes to speak. Do we have any requests?
We
Or
do not
on-
have any public speakers here in person or online.
Thank you. Move on. I'm going to announce out of closed session. The board met in closed session this evening and no reportable action was taken. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Director Gleason,
Yes.
Director Kirstine Tucker,
Yes.
President McNiven,
Yes.
Director Holman,
Yes.
Director Kishimoto, Director Seer.
yes,
Thank you. Motion passes 6-0.
All right, well, we have a special order of the day today, which is introduction of staff, new staff. Go for it.
Excuse me, try that again. Good evening, Board. Kirk Landington, Natural Resources Manager. I'm thrilled to be here tonight to introduce a newest staff member to the Natural Resources Department. Standing next to me is Hannah Wallace, and she is joining the Natural Resources Department as our new Ecologist 3. This position you might recognize better by its old title, which is our Integrated Pest Management Coordinator. And so, excuse me, take off my glasses. Hannah holds a bachelor's in science degree in ecology and evolutionary biology from University of California, Santa Cruz. And she spent the last 9 years working as the agricultural programs biologist at the Monterey County Agricultural Commissioner's Office. And then 4 years prior to that, as well with the Agricultural Commissioner as an agricultural biologist and inspector. While there, she oversaw the Integrated Pest Management Unit and acted as the chief scientific resource for the Ag Commissioner, specializing in botany, entomology, and plant pathology in agriculture, urban, and natural environments. No small feat, given the extensive agricultural and open space lands within Monterey County. Prior to her work at the Agricultural Commissioner's Office, I was interested to learn about some of Hannah's previous biological work that included working as a veterinary technician as she was helping put herself through college. And then, as she puts it, a quote, budding marine biologist working with marine mammals along the West Coast. Hannah is a fellow Santa Cruz resident, and as you probably are aware, that's a blessing and a curse, given the commute that you have to endure to come over from Santa Cruz, but it is a wonderful area to live. And she enjoys many different hobbies, including music, yoga, and arts and crafts. And Hannah started on March 4th last week. And so, Hannah, if you want to say anything.
Hi, everybody. I'm just very happy to be here. It's nice to be on board with you guys. This is a bit of a full circle for me because I did a lot of field biology at the beginning of my career and then took a little bit of a diversion into regulation and then had to marry those skill sets and worked in that realm for 10 years. But now to be able to apply those skills to natural resource management and land stewardship is really a labor of love for me. And so I'm very excited to join such a vibrant team and be part of your efforts. So thank you so much for having me.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. Well, now we will move on to the consent calendar. Does any member of the board wish to have any item pulled from the consent calendar? Okay, seeing none, may I have a motion? Oh, is there any public comment on the consent calendar?
And we have no public comments here in person or virtually.
All right.
Move adoption of the consent calendar.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Director Gleason,
Yes.
Director Christine Tucker,
Yes.
President McNiven,
Yes.
Director Holman,
Yes.
Director Kishimoto, Director Seer. Motion passes 6-0.
Great. Okay, we'll move on to item 6, which is the Human Mountain Lion Interaction Study and Management Plan Annual Update for Year 3. Staff report, please.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm Matt Sharp-Cheney, Resource Management Specialist 2 with the Natural Resources Department. And it's my pleasure this evening to introduce our speaker, John Morgan. John is a PhD candidate at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and a biologist for the Santa Cruz Puma Project. John's research focuses on understanding the effects of human activity on mountain lion ecology. He is interested in the study of animal movement, wildlife conservation, and the ecological effects of global change. John has been working with the Santa Cruz Puma Project for 5 years and enjoys working on collaborative interdisciplinary projects that result in applied conservation outcomes. So with that, I'll introduce John.
Thanks so much for having me here today. I'm very excited for this opportunity to speak with you all. And I'm excited to share a little bit more about what we've been working on over the past year. And so today I'm going to go through our year 3 updates. And so we're now 3 years into a 5-year project that really focuses on understanding human mountain lion interactions, both within district preserves and in the larger Santa Cruz Mountain area. And so to get started, I'd like to go through some of the primary objectives that we laid out at the beginning of the project. And then I'll go through with some more specifics regarding each objective and where they stand today and the progress that we've made during year 3. And so to begin, we were first interested in really estimating the population size of the mountain lion population size in the entire Santa Cruz Mountains. So that's sort of at a broad scale, and then we can zoom in and think about more local scale population size and density estimates, and really understand the dynamics that are currently occurring on the landscape. We're also interested in quantifying mountain lion home range size. So this is more at the individual level and thinking about how individual mountain lions are using space and how much space is required to sustain a long-term viable mountain lion population. And then third, we're interested in the factors that are influencing human mountain lion interactions. And with this, we're especially interested in the effects of outdoor recreation. And so a lot of our previous work has focused on other forms of human disturbance, such as housing density or sort of urban development. And here we're getting into these new questions regarding human presence and specifically recreation. And then finally, we're interested in understanding different management strategies and really testing the efficacy of these strategies and their potential to reduce human mountain lion interactions, or human mountain lion conflict. And so I'm hoping everyone can see this, so I'm sorry if it's a little bit cut off, but really all of these objectives are contributing to a larger goal of understanding the factors that influence human mountain lion interactions. And this will all contribute to a larger management plan that will be complete at the end of year 5 with regard to making management decisions and recommendations to help reduce the potential for human mountain lion conflict. And so before I get into too many of the specifics of those objectives, I really want to talk a little bit about the field work that we've been conducting during year 3 of this project. And this has primarily involved the capture and collaring of mountain lions. And so during 2023, we were able to capture and collar 21 different mountain lions, and this included 10 adults and 11 kittens. And this brings our total up to 29 adults over the course of the project. And this number of individuals is something that we're excited about and feel is going to help us help us get at the objectives that we outlined at the beginning of the project. And actually, before coming here today, I was taking a closer look at some of these data. And so if you add the kitten collaring events and then some of the recollaring events, so when a GPS collar runs low on battery, we often replace that battery. And when you incorporate those, capture events were up to over 50 captures since the project began.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
So if you go back to the prior slide, so captured and collared 21 mountain lions, and that's 10 adults, 11 kittens. Boy, would like to be there for that. But then it's 29 unique adults monitored. So is there a time frame associated with that first large bullet, or why don't those numbers add up?
Yeah, sorry, that's a little bit confusing. So during 2023, we caught 10 adults and 11 kittens, and so that's the 21 individuals for that year. And then with the 29, that's only adults. So 10 of those adults were during 2023, and the other 19 were from the past 2 years. So I've excluded the kittens in that number. And that's largely because a lot of the analysis we do with regard to movement data is only using the adults rather than the kittens. Does that help clarify? Or?
Yeah, but why are you collaring kittens then if you don't track their movements?
Yeah, and so I have a few slides on that a little later on, but we are able to keep track of survival rates rather than movement data with smaller collars. Because of the kitten size, we're not able to put a full GPS unit on them, but we can use VHF just to monitor survival. Yeah. And so of those individuals, I really want to emphasize these 4 females, and that's because they all had kittens over the summer. And so we were really excited about this opportunity to better understand reproductive events within this population. And 2 of these individuals, 121F up in Coal Creek and then 114F in Sierra Azul, had their dens on Midpen preserves. And so this figure here shows the movement track of 114F, and this is typical of denning behavior. And you'll notice that she continues to return to the same location on the landscape consecutively over about a month and a half. And so when we start to see this behavior, it's indicative of one or two things. This could either be a feeding event in which she has a prey item that she's returning to feed over time. However, that typically lasts about a week and then they move on. So in this case, where it lasts almost a month and a half, then we can be fairly certain that that is a den. So then we can go to that den site and start to characterize certain things about the den to better understand what's happening. So we can characterize the habitat to better understand the habitat needs of successful reproductive events. And then, like I had mentioned, if we use these small expandable VHF collars that allow us to monitor survival, we can really start to understand the survival rates and the population dynamics of the larger population.
Quick question.
Yes.
The movement is centered around two specific points.
Mhm.
Is that a relocation of the den?
Yes, exactly. And so that's fairly typical, that they'll stay at the same den site for about a month, and then they'll move the kittens sort of one by one into a new den that's often a few hundred meters away. And that could have to do with any number of things, but we think it has to do with just maintaining a safe den site that is also close to an area where they feel like they can make kills and have enough prey on the landscape. And so every month or so, they'll move that den. Yeah. And so all of these types of data contribute to a larger understanding of the population dynamics of mountain lions. And so last year, colleagues of mine published this paper that incorporated some of these data, such as kitten survival, as well as adult female survival. And really what this allows us to better understand is not only the survival rate of unique individuals, but ultimately the larger population growth rates. And this is really critical, especially in the context of mountain lions, and specifically these coastal mountain lions, now as candidate species for a potential endangered species across California. Having these types of data is going to help us better understand whether this population is growing or declining, and really what's at stake specifically for this at-risk population. So next I want to go through some of the objectives that I outlined at the beginning, and the first of which is estimating the local population size. And to get at this question of how many mountain lions there are across the Santa Cruz Mountains, we're really going to draw on two sources of data, one being the GPS collar data that we've been collecting, and another being data from remote camera traps. And having this population size estimate is, again, going to be critical for future conservation efforts, and it gives us a sort of benchmark to understand how many mountain lions are on the landscape now, and what does that look like in the future, and again, we get a sense of whether this population is growing or declining. We can also zoom in a little bit closer and think about different regions of the Santa Cruz Mountains and how the densities in particular regions differ, and what habitat characteristics or human dimensions might be contributing to those differences in density or abundance. And so while the first figure has the home ranges of our collared mountain lions, we also have this grid of remote sensor cameras. And so these cameras take pictures when there's motion in front of them. And we've had this grid on the landscape for several years now, and it consists of over 100 cameras, and we deploy them for several months each spring. And so the combination of these camera data with our collared mountain lion movement data will allow us to get an accurate estimate of how many individuals there are in the landscape. And while that grid is fairly large and covers the larger Santa Cruz Mountains, we also have a smaller grid that is in Rancho San Antonio, and we've been working closely with Karine and some of the Midpen staff to help maintain this grid and to analyze these data. And we feel this is particularly important in the context of Rancho San Antonio, because a lot of this project sort of stemmed from an increase in in sightings of mountain lions on this particular preserve and some concern about human mountain lion interactions within this preserve. And so using these data, we'll also have an estimate of the relative abundance of mountain lions, and we can compare how many mountain lions there are within Rancho San Antonio and if that differs from the larger landscape. And so all of these data, we're tagging or we're identifying the species in each of these photos using a online platform called Wildlife Insights. And one of the sort of exciting pieces of this project is that it allows us to incorporate other volunteers and undergraduate students into the project. And so specifically with the undergraduates that I've had the opportunity to work closely with, they have the opportunity to gain experience with the photo tagging process and identifying species from these cameras. And so we've trained 13 undergraduates so far, and we plan to continue doing so over the next 2 years. And with their help, we've tagged over 700,000 images, which will contribute to this understanding of population dynamics and densities on the landscape. So moving into objective 2, we're interested not only on as sort of the population size level, we also want to think about the amount of space that each individual is using across the landscape. And so we can compare the home range size of these individuals throughout different parts of the study area. And this allows us to start to ask questions about the habitat characteristics, or again, the human dimensions that might be affecting the space use or the behavior of mountain lions. And so we started off with sort of a rough estimate using the GPS collar data, and we can look at those data points on the landscape and get an estimate of how much area each individual is using. And when we do that, we see that females on average are using about 20 square miles, whereas males are typically using 45 square miles. And one of the questions that we had asked at the beginning of this project was whether or not the individuals, the mountain lions on mid-pen preserves were behaving differently than those that are outside of mid-pen preserves. And so one metric that we could use to get at that question is, are they using different amounts of space, whether they're on district preserves or outside of that area? And when we take a look at that and sort of split the data into 2 different groups, those that have overlapping territories with district properties and those that don't, we really don't see a difference in their home range size. So this is something that we're still looking into, and there's some different ways that we can think about space use and behavior and do the same sort of comparison. But at least at the home range level, or sort of this like territory size level, we see that it's fairly consistent across the landscape. So moving into objective 3, this really has to do with understanding how humans and mountain lions are interacting on the landscape. And as I mentioned before, this is particularly within the context of outdoor recreation. So we're thinking about how trail use and also trail density affects mountain lion movement behavior. And to get at some of these questions, we're using Strava, which is a cell phone application that recreationists can use to track their activity. And this is a really valuable and exciting and fairly unique data set in that it gives us really fine scale data on recreation, both spatially and temporally. And then we can overlay that with our movement data to really understand how mountain lions are interacting on the landscape with these people. And so these next figures show a traditional, or a sort of a typical movement path of a mountain lion. In this case, it's 25F, who is one of our older cats that we have collared, and her home range is down in Wilder Ranch in Santa Cruz. And so you can see that she sort of moves towards this trail at the edge of the forest, and then moves away from it back into the forest and continues on. And the reason we have this buffer around that point is because these are points of interest where trails are fairly nearby to a location that was received from the GPS collar. And then the Strava data allows us to quantify the number of people that might have been on that trail within a certain time period relative to that mountain line. And so with these data, we can ask questions such as how the outdoor recreation is influencing mountain lion habitat use and movement behavior. We can also then compare outdoor recreation to other forms of human disturbance. So like I mentioned earlier, historically, we've thought about human disturbance more as structural forms of disturbance, such as houses, sort of static forms of disturbance. And now what's really unique about this study is that we're incorporating a more dynamic measure of human disturbance on the landscape. And then finally, we're interested in how prolonged exposure to recreation activity might change the movement behavior of these individuals. So with this, we can ask questions related to habituation and do mountain lions behave differently if they're exposed consistently to high levels of recreation within their home range. So all of this work is ongoing. This is a lot of what we've been working on over the past year, and we plan to have a lot of these analyses done in the coming year. And so we're excited to share these results in the near future. And we're also excited to have these published in peer-reviewed scientific journals. I've included this figure just again to highlight the value of some of the Strava data. And so this is again, excuse me, Rancho San Antonio and the trail system there. And then these trails are color-coded based on the intensity of use. So using these cell phone data, we can then compare sort of where in the park we see the highest amounts of use. And ultimately, how does that affect mountain lion movement? And then finally, the fourth piece that we've been working on has to do with really testing the efficacy of different management strategies and how they can be used to reduce the potential for human mountain lion conflict. And we've really been focusing on two methods. The first of this is a behavioral modification method. This protocol is something that we've come up with in the first year of this study. And during 2023, we were able to use this protocol on two different collared mountain lions, which brings our total up to 5 mountain lions to date. And we're continuing this work this spring and throughout this coming year. And then the second method that we've been using uses shaded fuel breaks. And so these are areas of vegetation that have been cleared. The understory has been cleared, often for fire management. And we're wondering if these might serve a dual purpose, not only in terms of fire management, but also in helping keep mountain lions farther away from people and trails. And the idea here is that by removing the understory, this habitat becomes less favorable for mountain lions because they don't have that cover that they typically like to move through. And so if we can strategically place these fuel breaks that are already on the landscape near trails or near high human use areas, it might create a habitat that is then less favorable for mountain lions, or that mountain lions spend less time in, and then there's a lower probability of human mountain lion encounters in that area. And so as we move into year 4, there's a few things that we'll be focusing on. One, in the more immediate future, we're really going to start looking closely at these different management techniques and really try to understand their efficacy in helping prevent human mountain lion encounters. We'll also be shifting our focus towards data analysis. And so while a lot of our field work will be continuing to occur, we also plan to make a lot of progress in terms of the analytical side of this work. With regard to our third objective with understanding human mountain lion interactions, we're hoping to publish a peer-reviewed scientific paper this year that incorporates that Strava data and helps quantify these dynamics on the landscape. We'll also begin our population estimate this coming year, and we'll continue to provide these mentorship opportunities to our undergraduate team. And then I also want to reiterate that all of this work will ultimately help inform a management plan that is really aimed at making recommendations both here locally, but also at a larger scale for different parks and really help us try to reduce the probability of human mountain lion conflict and ultimately contribute to both recreation opportunities for people on the landscape, but also help support a viable mountain lion population. So with that, I want to say thank you. Thanks for having me, and I really appreciate your support for all of this work, and we're excited to continue during year 4.
Thank you very much.
Great. So we have some questions for you.
Great.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so it's so exciting, I'm sure. Hopefully we're going to get a many new crop, a big crop of UC Santa Cruz graduates and majoring in. So that's great. Well, there's quite a few questions, but I'll try to limit them. One is kind of, so what are we learning about where they put the dens? I mean, is it something that has to be even more remote from trails, et cetera?
Yeah, that's typically what we see, is that they tend to be in really densely vegetated habitat, fairly far away from urban centers and far away from trails. And yet there's also, this is a little bit anecdotal, but it's sort of this balance of having vegetated habitat and then also prey availability. So females with kittens typically need to have higher kill rates, and so because they're feeding more, there's also an emphasis on having a high prevalence of deer in that area.
Food
Yes,
nearby. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Then I assume we're kind of gathering the time of day of these as well, because I mean, one assumption is that they're on the move mostly in the dusk, and is that right?
Yeah, and so they tend to be more active during these crepuscular hours and at night. And so during the day, we see that they bed down and there's very little movement.
Mm-hmm. And I guess on that map of the movements, I guess so at least a couple of them were crossing 17, it looks like. Is that right? I couldn't quite
There
tell
are
on the
a
map.
few, yeah, we have, so 114, who's currently collared in Sierra Azul, she's crossed 17 multiple times up near the Lexington Reservoir area.
Wow.
And so we do really take note of those crossing sites. And we're pleased to see the Laurel Curve underpass go in, and we're hoping that these data can also contribute to future crossing structures.
Okay. Good. Oh, and then Jasper Ridge, are we coordinating with them, or aren't they doing something similar?
I'm not as familiar with
Not
that
sure. We're not,
project.
you haven't heard of anything? Okay, I thought they had wildlife cameras, but maybe not specific to mountain lions. Okay, thank you. So, thank you.
Any more? Yeah, Director Gleason.
Yeah, I think we asked last year about the current population size estimate in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Do you have any updates, different thinking on?
We don't have our formal estimate done, so we don't have sort of an official number. We tend to think that there's on the order of 60 to 75 adults in that greater Santa Cruz Mountain area. And hopefully sort of at the end of this coming year, we'll be able to confirm that. There was a study that hasn't been published yet that also happened in this area using scat and like scat detection dogs. And so we'll also have that to compare to. And I think it will be a nice opportunity to sort of both compare methods, but also ultimately compare those numbers and see if we're getting something similar.
Great. Yeah. And I was curious, when you're collaring the kittens, how do you deal with their growth with collar size?
Yeah, so we have these expandable collars that sort of grow with these kittens. And so they have quite a bit of elastic in them that allow them to expand as the kittens grow. And ultimately, we err on the side of caution, and more often than not, these collars aren't going to last too long. They're going to come off of the kittens, and that's what they're designed to do, so that they don't stay on too long. But it does give us information about survival in these sort of first few months of their life that's really critical and really has low survival rates. So yeah, they tend to grow with them and then ultimately fall off.
And what are the survival rates commonly?
They're fairly low. I was actually just looking at it before coming here, and I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. In that paper that we published last year, we have those rates, and it's broken down because it's fairly distinct across age classes and also sex. And so adult females differ than adult males, and then similarly juveniles and kitten stages, they all have their different rates. We see that male survival is a lot lower than female survival. That ultimately has to do with competition, male-male competition, particularly at the young age classes. So juvenile males tend to have fairly low survival rates. And then also in that paper, there was one of the sort of the neat findings was that for adult females, which typically have a higher survival rate than the rest of the population, that dramatically declines as you increase fragmentation and housing development in their home range. And so there's almost a 40% decline based on that sort of annual survival rate based on the amount of fragmentation that is in their home range.
Thanks very much.
Director Kirsten Tucker, are you interested in asking any questions?
Yes, thank you. First off, I really, really appreciated the report. Very fascinating, and the complexity of the data analyses that you're conducting and the kind of the creativity that you're bringing to bear on this issue is just incredibly impressive. So thank you for that. I guess my question for you is whether we're seeing a trend of mountain lions in general habituating to humans. Let me go down a little logic path here. So let me ask some questions. Is that a trend that we're seeing in general?
It's a really good question, and it's one that we're very interested in. We are confident that we're going to be able to get at that with some of these, using that Strava data to get an estimate of exposure to human activity. I guess the short answer is that we don't have a definitive answer at this point. So I don't want to say yes or no, but we're using these movement models that should allow us to look at different individuals and incorporate that measure of exposure. And then we can say, are individuals that have higher exposure, are they more likely or more willing to get close to humans than those with low exposure? And that would suggest that there's a habituation going on. So I don't have a great answer for you at the moment, but hopefully in a year from now, we will have that answer.
Oh, good. Okay. So my next question then, I think I read in your report that female mortality is linked to proximity to the built environment, as you might imagine.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And is that also linked to just proximity to humans? So, I'm thinking about areas where there is high trail density, for example, where is there a mortality difference in lions that are moving through an area where there's a lot of trail use?
Yeah, we didn't incorporate at the time of that analysis with the with those survival rates, we didn't have the trail use data. And so that was a former PhD student in our lab who was working on that project. And at that time, they were just using housing density sort of as the metric of human disturbance. And in this project, we're not planning to look at to do those survival analyses and the population growth rate estimates. It will focus more on habitat selection. So it's at an individual scale, how likely or how willing is a mountain lion to use a particular habitat based on the surrounding features. And so we won't have a great sense of the impacts on survival directly, but we will have an understanding of both population density in these high use areas and also the movement behavior of those individuals. So we already know that mountain lions tend to avoid areas that are near human development. And with this initial analysis, it also looks like they're similarly avoiding areas with a lot of trail use. So that could suggest that there's a similar effect. But again, I can't say exactly how that would scale up to survival or ultimately a population growth rate.
Yeah, okay, because I guess where I'm going with this is just kind of thinking into the future. If we find that there is a trend towards higher mortality, not only, with animals that are closer to the built environment also, but also animals that are in where their home range uh is where there's lots of trail activities. I'm wondering from a management perspective how that might inform our ability to manage the lions and to keep them away from these areas. I'm not sure that I'm making a whole lot of, I'm not sure I'm saying this right so that you can understand what I'm saying. But in other words, we want to figure out how to reduce the mortality of these animals as they move in their more urban environment. And so the question might be what kind of management techniques we would bring to bear. And probably not dogs necessarily, but we can't treat all the animals to scare them away from humans. But I'm just wondering, do we just hope that the population bounces back so that there's more lions, so that if more animals are killed, it's not such a threat to the population?
Yeah, I think it'll be important to think about as we sort of develop this management plan and these recommendations. I will say that we do know that mountain lions are fairly resilient and can adapt fairly well to these different forms of disturbance. So we have mountain lions with home ranges that are fairly urbanized and fairly disturbed, both in terms of the built environment and just human presence. But I do think, I guess one thing that I've been trying to think more about is these areas that maybe traditionally are viewed as high quality mountain lion habitat because there's no houses and they're off limits for development. If they have a lot of trails and a huge number of people using those trails every day, perhaps that habitat quality isn't actually as good as we thought it might be. And so even at that scale, not quite getting towards like survival and population growth rates, but even just thinking about habitat quality and what trail systems and human use mean for habitat quality is something that we're hoping to be able to make recommendations towards and incorporate into that management plan.
Yeah, I'd also be curious about kitten survival rates as a result of some of those things as well. So anyway, thank you very much. Really, really fascinating. And I can't wait to see next year's data and report. So thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Director Holman.
Yeah, thank you for being here. It's a topic of great interest to all of us. I was curious, the darling kittens, but how do you manage to capture kittens? Where's the mom?
The mom tends to be close by.
Yeah. So how do you manage to capture the kittens?
Yeah, it's kind of surprising, but typically we approach the den with a small group of people. So I wouldn't approach a den alone, and we try not to disturb the den either. So there's sort of this fine line of not having too many people. But if we have a team of 2 to 4 individuals of our team and of biologists, if we approach that den, we have the female mountain lion collared, and so we can track her movements with a VHF antenna, and so we know she's nearby, and we can also tell when she moves off the den. And so typically as we approach and get within really a few meters, they let us get pretty close, then they typically leave the den site and rely on the camouflage of those kittens to not be found. And so then we have this opportunity to be there at the den site, to place these collars and take some weights and measurements of these kittens while she's nearby, but not actively at the den. And then when we leave, she returns to the den. And we're always careful to, as we approach the den, we keep track of the mother. And similarly, when we leave, we make sure she goes back to the den. And the next day we'll come back and make sure that the kittens are alive, the mom's still there. that's worked for us for the entirety of our project.
Okay, so there's no apparent impact with human smell being on the kittens or anything like that. Doesn't seem like that's a factor.
No, so I know that with some other species that is a concern, but yeah, with mountain lions, we haven't had any issues with it.
Okay. Are mountain lions monogamous? And the reason I ask is because if there are more, you're grinning, is because if there are more females than males and to keep the population going, it's like, so are mountain lions monogamous?
No, so typically a male mountain lion, as we saw with those home range estimates, they have almost double, if not more, territory than the females. And so they have these really large territories with multiple females within those territories. And so they'll breed with multiple females. And because those females have smaller territories, they're able to have, there's more abundance of females. And so there's a lot of male-male competition to not allow the overlapping male territories, but they'll tolerate overlapping females.
Yeah, I wasn't sure that that was, having different females for the same male, if it was just the male is going further because they're hunting. So, or maybe both.
It's probably a little bit of both. They are going to maintain that territory both for prey availability, but also access to mates.
Okay. Have we had, don't remember offhand, have we had any, or have there been any mountain lion human interactions in the last year?
So there's been, I'll maybe let Matt jump in here too. I know there's been sightings, but in terms of these like close encounters, I guess I don't believe there have been.
Okay, good.
Yeah, Matt Sharp, Cheney with Natural Resources again. We do have observations that come in from members of the public and staff, but nothing of significant concern in the last year in terms of encounters or potential attacks, things of that nature.
Great. And then just two more questions. One, is there any idea why this one female crosses 17 and what time of day and the others don't, seems like, but she does? Is there any idea why?
No, I think it's certainly there's just a spatial component where they are looking for food or looking for mates, and unfortunately there's a lot of roads around, and so a lot of times roads do match up well with territory edges and they're not going to cross, but it's not so uncommon that they do attempt to cross. So unfortunately last summer we had several mortality events on 17. So some are successful and some aren't. And it just happens that her home range butts up against 17. And the majority of the time she spends on the east side of 17, but every now and then she will cross over.
I'd almost rather keep her away from 17 than from humans.
Yeah.
And the last question I have is, and I think I've asked this before, if we think that the population, mountain lion population is 65 to 70 in the Santa Cruz Mountains, but with that range and the terrain and stuff, do we have any notion of how many mountain lions ideally, what's ideally, how many mountain lions at that area would sustain?
I think, I guess as it's currently developed, if we look at like the population dynamics, it's fairly stable over time right now. So in that same paper that came out last year, there was a growth rate of about 1.1. So if a growth rate of 1 means it's just steady through time. And so it's fairly steady, if not like slightly increasing, but not very significantly. So to me, that suggests that with the current availability of habitat, the population size is stable over time, and we're not so concerned with having a low population number or a population that's too large. Really, in terms of the conservation implications, we're more concerned with like the genetic connectivity of our population. And that's where sort of this listing as a statewide endangered species comes into play. It's really less about numbers and more about the genetics.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Sorry, jump in again real
Yeah.
quick. Backtracking to the previous question on human mountain lion interactions, there was an attack on a 5-year-old boy in Half Moon Bay off of Tunitas Creek Road in January of 2023, and not on Midpen property, but pretty close to a Midpen preserve. So did just want to mention that.
Okay, very good. And there might be a little bit of a difference on the last question. Might be a little bit of a difference, but I don't know. You guys are the experts about what would be the ideal mountain lion population as opposed to how it's incrementally increasing as we see it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.
Any more? I was just wondering if you have seen any mountain lions coming under Laurel Curve yet?
We have.
You have?
Yes, which we were very pleased to see that one passed through
One.
the entirety of the underpass. And there seems to be a male in that same area that is that we
Looking.
are seeing on camera traps near the Laurel Curve.
Did
Yes.
they go back? Did you see them go both directions?
The one that we saw go through wasn't collared, so it was just
Oh.
with camera trap data.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if they saw going both directions, but
Oh, that's
I know Land Trust has some cameras
Yeah,
right next to the
Uh-huh.
underpass, and
Yeah.
they did see one go through.
encouraging.
Yeah.
Thank
yeah,
you. Thank
you're
you
welcome.
so much
Thanks.
for taking the.
Lion, I forget which community, but the lion wandering through the neighborhood and hiding in the garage. And, great to come home for.
Oh, and one more. You don't know if any of the kitties are alive, do you? If all the kitties survived so far, or?
We do see, so all of their collars at this point have come off.
Oh, okay.
But we do see that, I believe one of the females that is near Coal Creek still has at least one kitten with her. And then we haven't seen 114 with kittens. So I think it's hard to say exactly because we need camera data to confirm. We have a cat collared sort of closer to Santa Cruz, and she was one of the individuals that we collared kittens for over the summer, and she recently was on camera with 2 of her kittens still alive. And so now it's nice to see at this stage where they're several months in,
Yeah.
the survival probability increases dramatically. Yeah.
Coal Creek is on the east side of Skyline, right? On the sort of developed side. Am I right? Am I thinking?
That's correct.
Wow.
Mhm.
She's taking a chance.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very
thanks.
much. Really appreciate it. Okay. We
Okay.
could. Oh, you know what? Public comment.
President McNiven, there are no public comments here in person or online.
Thank you. What else? No vote is required for this item, so we can just give you a nod
Okay.
and a thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, board business item number 7 is the legislative position recommendations. Stuff.
Is there something else I need to? Oh, perfect. Okay. Shall I start? Okay.
Go for it.
Okay. Okay, good evening, members of the board. My name is Josh Hugg. I'm your Governmental Affairs Program Manager, and I'm here tonight to
have you consider a number of pieces of legislation for positions by the district. The general manager's recommendation is that you approve the recommended list of legislative positions for the 2024 state legislative session. Just a few background details, and I apologize for the color on the screen. But this year, this legislative session, there were over 2,000 bills that were released by the legislature by the February 16th deadline. Our lobbyists and myself, we poured through these bills to find, to identify ones that are particularly relevant to the district, to the point where we would want to take a position on them, either to support or potentially oppose a bill. So in determining a position, we go through a fairly extensive process. I'll jump to the flow chart here that describes it. When those bills come in, we sort them by department, and that sublist of legislation we present to each individual department as they apply. So natural resources generally has the most bills to consider: planning, real property, potentially finance in certain years. So we meet within the individual departments. They make recommendations based on the descriptions of the bill and the details, and ultimately they filter to you for tonight's consideration. In addition to a recommendation, we also assign priority numbers to those bills. As you might expect, priority 1 bills get the most attention. They tend to be more actively advocated for. Priority 2 bills generally generate a letter of support, and that's communicated to the author and to the individual committees as they come up for consideration. And priority 3 bills tend to sit in the background, and we monitor them every week. We get a list of all the bills that have been amended, and those bills that are priority 3 which also tend to have watch positions. We evaluate to see if there's a significant development that requires an action. At this point for this session, relative to previous years, this is actually a pretty slow session, and just by the number of bills that we're tracking and ones that we think are particularly significant. As far as priority 1 bills, we have 2 of them up for consideration tonight. One is AB 2320, Wildlife Connectivity and Climate Adaptation Act of 2024. And this is a bill that's being sponsored by the Wildlife Crossing Working Group. It's a statewide coalition of agencies and supporters that promote the interests of habitat connectivity. And this one seeks to increase the significance of habitat fragmentation and habitat connectivity within the framework of 30 by 30. The second bill is from Assemblymember Grayson. It's being sponsored by the East Bay Regional Park District. And the purpose of this particular bill is to potentially expedite the opening of acquired properties that have existing infrastructure on it, trails, roads, etc., to the public, to exempt that from CEQA consideration if no modifications are being done to the property. So if it's just being acquired and then made available to the public. So they are seeking an exemption for that. One potential opportunity for us may be something like Cloverdale, if we determine that some of the existing areas would be suitable in their existing state for public access. So those are the 2 bills that we currently have identified as priority 1. We also have priority 2 bills, the details of which are in attachment 1. We have 11 of them that cover land protection, public access, and stewardship. So actually fewer categories this year than we have in prior years. And then again, we're tracking approximately 100 bills. I say approximately because our lobbyists and other sources are constantly feeding us new legislation to consider. And at the minimum, we add it to the list for tracking, and we monitor it anytime it gets amended or makes progress. I guess I'll stop here. Does anyone have any questions about the legislation we're proposing for positions?
So, well, thank you for your hard work of pouring through these. Yes, let's see, on the AB 2091 about the CEQA exemption. So, okay, we were talking about parking lots today. But if our parking lots, adding a parking lot would be exempt or not exempt?
If you're adding a parking lot, then it would not be exempt.
It would not be exempt.
No, if you're adding infrastructure.
Oh, okay. I see. Okay, so it's adding public access by opening up trails is okay, but
If
not
there's an
adding infrastructure.
existing trail on there already, let's say the ranch that you purchased, they
Okay,
privately built their own trail,
right.
and we want to open that one. Let's say Wilbur's Watch, maybe a version of that.
Uh-huh.
General Counsel Hillary Stevenson. The idea is that right now there's kind of maybe an ambiguity or a sticking point in CEQA about a change in use. So there could be an existing trail or an existing road that was used for perhaps other purposes, not including public access. And so if this kind of ambiguity could be resolved, then that the area that's already in existence could be used for public access, and that wouldn't be considered a change in use that would automatically trigger further environmental analysis. So it's basically using an existing facility or a disturbed area for kind of similar uses, but which might include public access, if that helps. I think it would be pretty,
still-
pretty limited circumstances when it would apply.
But we're still talking about trails and not parking lots.
Yeah.
Well, right now there's a proposal to include disturbed areas.
Oh, disturbed areas. Okay, is that what you said? Oh,
But
see.
it wouldn't, that could be just like a permitted parking area.
Okay,
The district, I'm kind of guessing, has done some similar
I see.
types of projects in the past, or, it's not a project, but similar types of access where there's a cleared area and it's okay to, park a few cars and have some limited access there. So those are the types of ideas that we've shared with East Bay Parks about how could we,
Okay,
how could we provide public access when
I know.
when there's really already a mowed area or a compacted area or a trail or
see.
something like that. Hopefully
Okay.
that helps.
I mean, it seems like a simple thing, which makes sense, but I could see there's some, if somebody had privately cut a lot of trails that were causing a lot of erosion, I mean, obviously we wouldn't want to continue that use, so.
Right,
But,
right.
yeah.
It would be up to an agency like ours to make that determination of which one's appropriate to make available to the public.
Or whether to avail itself of that exception at all. Exemption.
That's, yes.
Yeah. So just because the exemption exists does not
Yeah,
mean.
yeah. Okay,
One other thing to note is that this is a 5-year pilot. So it will sunset in 2030.
Director Gleason.
I was just wondering if there were any comments from the committee, anything that was changed in that pack or?
These bills did not receive committee because of the time constraints
Oh, I
between
see.
when the
Okay.
bills were released. We actually had 2 requests today for letters, because there's a committee deadline for submitting letters today for a couple of these bills. So we try to move this as expeditiously as possible.
Director Kirsten Tucker, do you have any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Director Holman.
Oh, sorry.
Not a question, just a comment. It's a whale of a lot of legal print to wade through and pull out the ones that are most probably impactful to the district. Much appreciated.
So a question about AB 1889.
Yes.
It's a priority 2, and why is that? Because it's something pretty integral to our
Yeah,
mission.
we could bump the priority on that. In fact, I think tonight's discussion kind of highlighted that, the prior presentation regarding the relationship between habitat connectivity and the built environment. This bill, as you saw, would create the requirement to include a wildlife connectivity element within a city's general plan. Of course, every city has its own considerations, and particularly the unincorporated areas have plenty of room for wildlife movement. But there is, as we see with mountain lions moving through urban and suburban areas, they also interact with the built environment, and it'd be important to capture that.
So do you want a motion to that effect? You have a first and a second here.
I'm happy to include it, and if we need to formalize that, sure.
Yeah, as a priority 1.
Yeah.
Okay. And is there any update on prior legislation that was proposed to require Caltrans, for instance, and any expansion of other transit agencies to not only evaluate but mitigate if there was a migration?
I don't have specific project updates, but I know that they are actively implementing it. I was actually talking to Assemblymember Friedman's office today, and last year's budget allocated funding to hire 8 more staff within the permitting within CDFW to address AB 2344, I think was the bill number. That created this collaboration between Caltrans and CDFW. But I have not heard of any projects yet that have benefited from that yet. The identification of those hotspots and then the mitigations that occur when Caltrans is doing activity in those areas.
And you haven't heard anything either about other transportation agencies besides just Caltrans? Because the legislation I think that was under consideration was just focused on Caltrans, which is big.
Yeah.
There are other.
Yes, in fact, I believe last year you had suggested that, and we've raised it with some of our partners. It hasn't quite got traction yet. It doesn't mean it's something we can't continue to push for.
If you think it's helpful for us to advocate with any of our legislators, or at such time as you think.
Yeah, we can certainly strategize as far as how to move that forward. And as you know, there are plenty of county roads that need that attention, whether it's the Monterey Road or Monterey Highway in Coyote Valley, certainly Alma Bridge Road with the Newts.
Yeah, I think of that area, but also think up in Sonoma County and Napa and all of that. They're just all kinds of county roads that just like cut across. Yeah.
But we have raised it, but
I know you have. Yeah. I just don't know if there's any updates or not. Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. And the committee.
Yes, Director Gleason.
A question about AB 2552. I think this was the rodenticide.
I'm sorry, which bill?
I think it was 2552.
Yes.
It has this 5,000-foot prohibition away from borders of open space. Is that right? So it's the prohibition inside that range.
Yes, that's amongst the prohibitions. It also, if I recall, expand the definition of a wildlife habitat area to include an open space land as defined. The bill would additionally prohibit the use of second-generation anticoagulant rodenticides. It also includes the addition of first-generation anticoagulant rodenticides as well, something that has not been done in the past. There's AB 1788 that was, I believe, 3 years ago or 4 years ago. Last year was 2332, also by Assemblymember Friedman, that added the first generation rodenticide to the list of bans. And then this is further expanding that list. And then, as you pointed out, adds that buffer.
Yeah, I was just wondering, it seems like that would then cover like pretty much all of the Santa Cruz Mountains. Is that true? Because almost every
1
place
mile
would be within a mile.
approximately 1 mile. That may be, that would, for places like Rancho San Antonio, that would be beneficial. I wish I wish Matt were still here. We actually received some photographs late last week of coyotes suffering from mange within Rancho San Antonio. And of course, that's generally the source of that comes from the use of rodenticides proximate to that preserve.
I was also wondering how many places in the valley this might apply to. For example, would some of the creeks and smaller local open spaces also qualify for this and then create pretty large areas in the valley? That
I'm not sure, to be honest.
All right, thanks.
Additional comment on this rodenticide one. I mean, I gave a talk at the forum right next to Rancho San Antonio. It was last year, I think, and yeah, they were saying, I think the forum knows about the rodenticide ban, but they were asking if we had reached out to their neighbors.
Yes,
and such.
we actually back in the fall, if I recall, we have an interesting public notification tool that identifies all of the parcels within a certain specified distance. I think we chose 500 feet of the perimeter of Rancho San Antonio and sent out postcards. We designed a postcard encouraging people to consider alternatives to the use of rodenticides. Also on several weekends during the year or during the late summer, early fall, we were doing tabling at Rancho. Received quite a bit of engagement, and we actually had a day where we had Midpen staff who spoke Chinese table as well because of the diverse population that uses that preserve, trying to find ways to better deliver our message.
Yeah.
So it continues to be a work in progress. In fact, after we received those photos from Matt Cheney, we resolved to do another round of tabling to try and continue to get the word out.
But wow, maybe I'm just thinking maybe this should be another one that gets elevated to first priority.
That is fine.
I would go with that.
Yeah. Okay.
I also think when you put out your postcards, you could indicate there's a $25 piece of equipment you can buy on Amazon that's very effective for rats. It's called Rat Zapper.
Yeah. Yep. For some information.
Rat Zapper. They go in, you put a little piece of peanut butter in there and they go in and they get zapped. You have to deal with them, but all you have to do is I don't mind.
They go in and they don't come back.
Yeah. Maybe mention what they could do instead of just say, don't do this.
Actually, during the tabling, we talk about integrated pest management,
Yeah.
generally starting with exclusion, and then going so far as to have an owl box that's been built. It's actually sitting in Matt Cheney's cube.
Yeah.
That they can build. We have the plans and the URL to access that.
Owls are a great idea.
Yeah. They eat quite a few rodents over the course of a year.
Well, I throw my rat-zapped rats out for the owls.
We could get some snakes.
Yeah.
Yeah, good luck.
But yeah, I think the rodenticide has a lot of resonance with the public. So yeah, I think they understand.
Mentioning an alternative is a great idea.
Yeah, we won't
Yeah,
certainly won't force anyone, but we'll suggest, these are alternatives and this is
Yeah.
why we're suggesting it.
yeah. Pictures of the coyotes. Any more questions, comments? Do we have public comment on this topic?
No, other than just simply the recommendation.
So we have no public comments in person or online.
Thank you. Did you want to say something else, Josh?
No, thank you for
You're
your
all done?
consideration. I guess, as you know, this is a team sport, so we work with both our collaborating organizations and certainly as you feel comfortable, enlist your assistance in promoting our mission in the legislative arena.
So a motion.
Please.
It would be to approve the recommended legislative priorities and to add AB 1889 about the wildlife connectivity and AB 2552 about the rodenticide. Just elevate them to priority one.
Roll call vote, please. Oh,
Yeah, can I ask a
Yes.
question? I just wanted to ask Josh and maybe Anna, how heavy a lift is that if we make this change? You said that this was a
Well,
relatively light
it's-
session, but
I mean, there are those occasions when we'll have multiple bills being heard at almost literally at the same time. We had that happen years ago, where we had two teams go up and address these bills. Generally, there's, something to do every other day on one of those bills, and we just kind of keep the plate spinning. Four is manageable.
how many did you have last year on
We
level
had
one?
I think we had 5 or 6.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is actually a relatively light year, in that regard.
And then just curious, Josh, between a 1 and a 2, what would the difference be?
A 2 is generally just a letter of support. We don't, unless, we're asked to do a bit more, and that's certainly if we have the bandwidth to support that. But, and in that case, our lobbyists will monitor when those priority 2 bills are being heard in a particular committee or on the floor, and they will update, they generate the initial letter and then they update it for the appropriate committee to communicate our position.
And then the 1 would be,
That one, we would be, communicating with the sponsor. If you recall, AB 2344, that bill that got Caltrans and CDFW to work together, we went so far as to generate an op-ed that was signed by Anna, Andrea McKenzie at the Open Space Authority and East Bay Parks General Manager. If you can,
was it
Sabrina
Sabrina?
Landreth. There we go. So all 3 of them signed that letter. We just big collaboration to get it past the finish line there.
And then finally, so that's good to know. And then finally, for the bills that we were thinking of elevating to a 2, to a 1, any concerns about the reactions or opposition? Sometimes that can play into sort of the decision on how far to elevate it.
Well, I think in these, particularly these 2 examples, I think we have the moral high ground, and we can tell our story about the pictures, tell more than 1,000 words with regard to the rodenticide use and the wild habitat connectivity. I mean, just the data presented tonight really emphasizes the importance of the built environment comprehending, they are not an island. They interact with natural and adjacent natural and working lands. There's language in there also for the cities not only to consult with CDFW, but also agencies like ours. So we can certainly add to their knowledge with regard to the sensitivities of the species that exist on our lands.
In my limited experience, we have more controversy when we oppose one of these bills. So supporting it's
Yes.
That's
refreshing.
usually the case,
Yes,
but that's
yes,
not always.
yes, we
the
do.
Yeah,
Oops.
yeah.
Okay, so it looks like we have a motion and a second. Are we ready to take a vote? Okay.
Director Gleason,
Yes.
Director Christine Tucker,
Yes.
President McNiven,
Yes.
Director Holman,
Yes.
Director Kishimoto,
Yes.
Director Seer.
Yeah,
Thank you. Motion passes 6-0.
I would also point out that, certainly if you come across legislation that looks particularly appropriate, please send it my way as well. I think actually yes, you had a question today about that. Yes.
Thank you
Oh,
so much,
thank you.
Josh. We appreciate it. All right, committee reports. Were there any committees? Yes. Let's start with the Hawthorne's Historic Complex Ad Hoc Committee meeting. Is that you?
It's Craig, Kurt, and I. So shall we carry the ball here? The Hawthorne's ad hoc. We met last week and were encouraged. I'm not quite sure how far to go at this juncture. But we were encouraged about a potential partner for part of the historic complex. And the board will be seeing something in the next, I'd say, month. And we took a look at the excellent work that the staff had done and consultant had done about the historic complex, which is what the ad hoc is, in terms of condition of buildings, which ones were priority to save and which ones could be demolished, and even if something could be removed, what we might do with that in order to continue the story of what happened on that in that area. So would you add anything?
Yeah, I think that covers it. Yeah,
Okay.
I think we have a promising partnership opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't rule out having other partnerships in the future because there are multiple buildings that have potential uses.
A great distinction to make. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Legislative Funding and Public Affairs Committee.
Yes, I can update on that. So we discussed the update to the Good Neighbor policy, and I think the staff had done a really good job of getting public feedback on it, on the current language, and then updating the language to reflect that public feedback. And that will also come before the full board here. I think, Director Christine Tucker, do you have any other comments on that?
No, thank you. It was an excellent discussion recap of the extensive public outreach that's gone into refreshing our Good Neighbor policy.
Thank you.
was I on the left back.
I think you were absent.
I was absent because I had made a commitment for that afternoon a month ago. And I didn't realize the committee was scheduled at the same time, so I was unable to attend.
All right, staff, are there any staff reports? No? No? Great. Director reports.
I think Director Kishimoto mentioned this last week, but we had the Santa Clara County Special Districts Association meeting, and there was no particular presentation in that meeting, but it gave the opportunity for a lot of the special districts to give more information about what they were doing. So there were actually some fairly long discussions about the various districts there. And one idea that came out of that I think Director Kishimoto did mention is that there might be interest in presentation from Midpen on the wildland fire resiliency program. I think that could be a very good idea.
Director Holman.
Just one, I don't see her here. Palo Alto is about to update its Creekside setback rules. And I think Jane Mark sent a letter in about that. And I'm not sure if we've seen it or not, but I appreciate that, and I may just be misremembering, I don't recall seeing it. Did you recall seeing it? No. So it'd be great if we could be forwarded that letter, and with gratitude that Jane has weighed in on that topic.
You know, I don't recall that letter in particular, but I'll check in with planning and Jane.
Somebody told me, I don't think I misunderstood. Somebody told me that they thought Midpen had sent in a letter, so I presume it would be Jane.
I would presume as well, but I just don't recall that, so I'll have
Okay,
to go
great.
back and look.
Thank you so much. And again, with gratitude if she has.
Okay.
Director Kishimoto.
Yes, thank you. Just to comment a little bit on this special districts meeting, which because two of the other members are Los Altos Hills and Saratoga fire districts, and so there's actually quite a bit of interest in wildland fire management. So that's why that came up. And let me see, I was supposed to go to the State of the Estuary conference earlier this week, but it suddenly got canceled. So, but next week I do plan to go to the California Land Trust meeting in Sacramento.
I apologize, I forgot. It was the day after the last board meeting that we had a public access working group meeting with the Portola Valley on the access to the Hawthorns property, and came to a bunch of conclusions. And yeah, the staff had an amazing way of dealing with it. We had, because I don't vote, but they each had a big blue sheet with number 1, number 2, number 3, down to a red sheet with number 5. So they could see, you didn't have to vote yes or no. You could grade your vote. So that was really interesting. I'm sure they'll got some good data to work through as what the community wants. And I think they want safety. So it'll be interesting to see where it all goes. We have an on-site meeting a week on Sunday. Thank you. Yes, Director Gleason. Do we get Miss Director Kirsten Tucker?
Nothing to report. Just been recovering from COVID.
Oh.
Would you finish that?
I'm working on it.
Well, and be here.
Definitely working on it.
Okay, and on that note, this meeting is adjourned. It is 8:33.